Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Cover One Buffalo Show. This is your matchup show here as we get ready for the Indianapolis Colts. I'm joined here by Nate Geary, and I gotta say, Nate, I've missed you, man. It's been a while since you and I were sharing the same screen space together.
That's a one-way street, brother. Yeah.
Oh,
But,
come
you
on,
miss
come
me.
on.
There's no love lost. No, I'm just kidding. It's good that you're finally done wallpapering and getting all your feminine products, everything out of the way. It's good to see you've made some time.
That's cool. That's cool. I understand. I'll get you back on Twitter a little bit later. But more importantly here, we're joined by Matt. What did I messed it up already? How do you say your last name again, Dan?
Danely.
Or Matt Danely. All right, perfect. And where are you coming from today? Tell the folks about you a little bit.
Man, I'm just some know nothing guy who likes the Colts. I don't really know else how to explain it,
So
no.
you're just like us.
Yeah, I'm just some random dude, and some guy threw some wallpaper behind me and microphone in front of me, man, and you know how it goes. No, just working for Stampede Blue, doing the podcast, the Colts cast on my end. And as you guys know, obviously that's a full-time job within itself, almost after real life. And then doing as much as I can on the site. I've been pretty active for about the past 5, 6, 7 years as far as creating some content about the Colts for various sites and various platforms, just watching and trying to, get my point of view across if anybody cares to hear it, and people have in the past. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Well, we appreciate you coming on with us tonight. It's been a wild week here for the Buffalo Bills as far as news goes. Nate knows all too well. His Twitter has been on fire since Nate Peterman's pick 6 to ruin the game last weekend. So our fans know what's happening right now with the Buffalo Bills and where things are at. Can you kind of fill us in up to this point of what the Colts have done up to this point as we get ready to face off?
Well, I mean, not much. I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, not in the way of victories anyways. They're just one of the more inconsistent teams in the league, and I think that goes away through most of the league. I think there's a lot of those guys, especially in the AFC South. That's kind of the deal right now with just about each team. The Colts in general, they've got Andrew Luck firing up, and that's always something that you want to see. He's in the top 3. I think he's still leading the league in attempts. I think he's third in the lowest
record breaking, right? Like he's on pace to have the most attempts all time.
Yeah, he's it's pretty insane. He's at almost 300 attempts right now through 6 weeks.
So much for easing him in, right?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty insane. But he's maintained his completion percentage, which is nice. And he's under 2,000 yards, but I think he's in the. Man, is he leading, or is he tied for the lead, or is tied for second or something like that in touchdowns? But at the same time, he's, I think at the top of the interception board too. But, I think we can count at least 4 of those being tipped passes. One way or another, he's hot. They've got a ton of guys that may be whatever you want to call role players, I suppose, in different positions of the field on both sides of the ball. And right now, not all of them, I guess. There's too few of them stepping up and really taking on a prime role, which is something that this team needs in order for Andrew Luck to be successful and for the Colts to be successful. Lots of drops over the past 3 weeks. Can't have it. They were actually one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league in fewest drops in the first few weeks. And now I think that they're the worst in the league. Or if not, they're darn close, and they've really caught up. So, this is a team battled with injuries, and it's going downhill, but at the same time, they're in almost every game. And they really shouldn't be.
It appears that way from the outside looking in, that you've been in every game. I did catch the New England game, and you guys definitely battled with them, and that was good to see if I'm a Colts fan. You mentioned some injuries. Is there anything new that popped up over the last week that Bills fans should be looking at, or anybody watching that plays fantasy should be looking at, as far as some injuries on your end that can affect this game?
We did see Clayton Geathers full practice, not so much with any fantasy there, but Hilton, he had a full practice today as well. So obviously not just Colts fans, but anybody who is a fantasy owner of him is going to be happy about that. The Colts and Colts fans are real happy to see that Margus Hunt was on the field again. And as weird as that sounds, it's Margus Hunt. He had been one of the most powerful energetic guys along that defensive line who'd really been creating some pressure, a lot of tackles for loss. The Colts were, at one time, a couple weeks ago, were like second or third in the league or leading the league in sacks, and we're definitely leading the league in tackles for loss. I don't think that's the case anymore, but they still got some of these guys coming back now who are going to be, able to get back, hopefully, to create some of what they've missed with them gone. Jack Doyle's still not practicing at all, so that's a concern. Right now, you're just lucky that Andrew Luck can make do with the pieces that he's got, and that the defense has enough to where they're forcing field goals as opposed to giving up a bunch of touchdowns, but they're still giving up a ton of points. Eric Swope, he was limited today as well. But Danico Autry, a guy who's really kind of underrated, flying on the radar, I think, for a lot of people. You see his name and you think, okay, he's not a bad player. He's been killing it, when he's healthy this year. He is always around the ball. He is always in the backfield. He is always pressuring the quarterback. He and Marcus Hunt right now, if you're looking fantasy-wise, and if you're going to use the Colts defense for fantasy, I think there's a couple situations that you may want to consider it, and that's only when they're healthy and Danico Autry and Marcus Hunt are healthy, because the rest of these guys, without them, don't seem to be able to create the pressure they have in general.
Or if we were starting Nathan Peterman, I would say that would be a good opportunity to play any defense.
Or a guy who has 4 starts in 7 years. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the other reason.
So, Nate, tell us, man, I haven't had a chance to really update. Is there any news on the Bills side with injuries and things like that we should be knowing about or looking for this matchup?
4 did not practices today. Obviously, the major one and the obvious one, Josh Allen, and the usual one in Lorenzo Alexander. He usually gets his rest day on Wednesdays. He's earned them. He can take as many rest days as he needs, because I mentioned a couple times on Twitter this week, he is playing the best football of his career, and that's saying something considering at 33 in 2016, he was arguably one of the best players in the league on defense. He was leading the league in sacks at points up until, I think, week 14 or 15, and then I forget who overtook him. I think Von Miller ended up overtaking him for sacks at the end of the year. Tywan Jones with his neck, he did not participate. Kyle Williams, another rest day for him, another guy who, again, absolutely deserves some rest at 35 or 36 years old or whatever he is, coming off a 2.5 sack performance in the first half last week. That Houston offensive line, what I just found through 6 weeks, has given up 70 quarterback hits. So not sure we got a true barometer of just how good this Bills defensive line can be because of how weak that offensive line was for Houston. And the other one to keep an eye on, or two to keep an eye on, obviously Trent Murphy with that. I believe it's an ankle injury. He went out in the game, ended up coming back, but I think he was a limited participant in practice, so he's still practicing. And the other guy that you want to keep an eye on this week is Vladimir Dukas, who is arguably their most consistent offensive lineman this year, out with a knee injury, or a limited participant with a knee injury that he got rolled up on during the game, but did come back in the second half.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing when we have to talk about being concerned about Vladimir Dukas not being able to play. That's been what kind of season it's been for us. So Matt, you kind of talked about Andrew Luck and what he's done and him being back and how fantastic that is. Obviously you have Frank Reich over there this year, and you got a whole new offensive scheme going. Kind of fill us in a little bit, maybe outside of necessarily just Andrew Luck, since we kind of covered that. Running backs, how is that going with this new scheme? What are you seeing out of that group? Because I like that young backfield that you guys got, and I think that you might be able to do something against the Bills there.
Yeah, there's some of these at every position, guys. I mean, this is the thing. This is the way that this team is built right now. Andrew Luck has this system. It kind of fits him. And what it really does is it fits his first quarter to a T. Andrew Luck has always been a quarterback that you needed to get into a rhythm. You don't have to throw 1 or 2 yards every time, but you have to get him into a rhythm with short, quick passes, get his arm going, get the guys that he's throwing the ball to ready and aware of what's going on. Then you have to start opening it up a little bit for him, because you have to be aggressive with a quarterback like Andrew Luck. Frank Reich has learned that quickly in the past few weeks. Yes, you don't want those attempts up, but when you're trailing and you're continually coming from behind, that's just what's going to happen. I like the running back situation as a whole. right now, but there's just so much that we really don't know. Can Nyheim Hines run the ball effectively in between the tackles consistently? The answer to that actually right now is no, he can't. He has been able to do it, but he can't do it consistently. You've got a guy like Marlon Mack who's either been injured or has not performed up to his, what we see for him. And this past week, he finally got some nice running room. He ran hard and powerful. His vision was good for once. That's a real thing for him. If his vision's good, he's electric and he can be very dangerous. Also, Jordan Wilkins, Robert Turbin, those guys just have to be that role-playing running back. They can't try to make those guys a feature piece, even in a running back by committee situation. It's kind of a thing where if you do that, you start being predictable, and that's a scary thing for the Colts offense, especially when you don't have a lot of playmakers involved. Being predictable is bad, but when you've got playmakers who can still take those predictable plays 20 yards as opposed to getting hit behind the line of scrimmage, there's a big difference in the production from a team in that regard. You look at the other, the skill positions are kind of a struggle. Zach Pascal right now is what, 4th or 5th on the team in targets, actually 6th, actually. Okay, so that's not too bad, but I thought he was actually 4th for some reason. But he's got just barely over a 50% catch rate. And that, you can do that with a lot of bad passes, but a lot of his have been drops, and he's just not becoming, the guy that the Colts hoped he could be. The Colts do have KJ Brent back on the practice squad now. He looked fantastic in training camp, guys. He really was doing a lot and looked good. Looked like he was going to be a really nice piece. Obviously, Deon Cain would have been nice to bring that along too. So there's a lot of future for the Colts in what they want to do. Colts fans have to be kind of, they have to have the glass half full, glass half empty type of approach. This year, you might as well kind of think, and it's okay to think that the Colts aren't really going to, exceed any expectations this year. But at the same time, next year, you have to hope, as long as some of these guys can be injury free, at least for the majority of next season, then you've really got something burning here, because there are some real talented guys that are on this roster or have been in IR. Matt Slauson played with a freaking broken back. Braden Smith is a rookie starting at right tackle, looking really good. I saw that the PFF has the Colts as their 10th best offensive line. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think that they're definitely in the top half of the league. And let me tell you what a big jump that is from any year that I can remember under Chuck Pagano. So there are things looking up. The problem is trying to put them all on the same ball and roll them down the hill.
Well, go ahead, Nate.
Because you mentioned a point about the short passing game with the running backs, but maybe more interestingly is sort of how they're using Eric Ebron with the, without having T.Y. Hilton, without having, of course, Jack Doyle. But you're looking at this Bills defense, Matt, and you're looking at a defense that I think really thrives in stopping that short passing game. Obviously, Tre'Davious White right now turning into one of the best young corners in the league. He's now shadowing other teams' number 1 wide receiver, which here in Buffalo, we just haven't had that guy, honestly, in quite a long time, or had a coach that was willing and felt so comfortable, especially with a young guy, to shadow. But it's really been the emergence of 3 players that are all either in their 1st or 2nd season, and that's Taron Johnson, their slot corner, who I think has turned into not only a really great run defender, but a guy who can swing both ways with his hips and really create matchup nightmares, because he can cover running backs coming out of the backfield, and of course, which I think the Colts have a bunch of those kinds of players. You look at Chester Rogers as sort of that slot guy or that smaller player. And I look at the 2 linebackers in Tremaine Edmonds and, of course, Matt Milano, 2 really, really good zone pass defenders, but both guys that can play man coverage as well. I think if the strength of this Colts passing offense is that short passing game, that's going to be a difficult go this week against a Bills defense that not only has come into their own the past 3 or 4 weeks just as a whole defensively, but limiting passers in such a way that I don't know that Bills fans have really come accustomed to in the last 2 years. They've been good at stopping the run, but not like they have in the short passing game, at least early. So how do you, in terms of if you're game planning for this game, how do the Colts have the tools if they have T.Y. Hilton back? Because that's a big if, I think, if they're going to go up against this Bills defense and hope that Tre'Davious White's on one guy,
I don't know if they've got the tools. Well, let me put this in a different way. I think that they've got the passing concepts. I think that they've got some matchups that they like. When you look at what the Colts are trying to do, a lot of what they try to do is isolate one defender. They try to, they do a lot pre-snap to try to get these guys to kind of figure what they're doing. And right now, the Bills I think they're still under 20 sacks on the year. And you've got a couple guys here. What it really amounts to is, can they stop the pressure when they're doing 5-step drops? And if they can, they'll be okay, because they've been doing the smash. They've been able to do a lot of nice concepts to get everything all set. And it's helping. I mean, it's helping because the outlook for everything that they've tried to do is not as clear as everybody, it may look at times, but they are trying to take Eric Ebron up the seam. They're trying to get some of those guys on the corner route. You saw that last week with even a guy that they just brought up from the practice squad, and things like that. So, I mean, they've used a lot of nice concepts, a lot of different passing combinations or route combinations to get these guys. And they're using a lot pre-snap. They're using a lot of motion, a lot of misdirection. And I think that they have Frank Reich's brain, and that's what really counts right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I love the point Nate brought up, because that's really going into this game for me as a Bills fan. There's not a ton of excitement knowing that Derek Anderson is going to be our quarterback. Really, like somebody here, Reptile in the chat room said, this is a matchup possibly for a top 5 pick. I think we're both teams are playing for the future and kind of developing guys. But the real matchup that I want to see is that Trey White versus T.Y. Hilton, assuming that they play or both are healthy, with T.Y. questionable here at this point. So I want to see that matchup. The thing that concerns me with what you talk about of creating matchups is Phillip Gaines on the outside, on the other side of getting picked on in a game.
You know what's interesting though about that, Aaron? I'm glad that you brought up that other cornerback position, because I heard Chris Brown on my way in, and on my way into the studio on Sunday. Chris Brown was talking about Dante Johnson, the guy that they got off of the Seahawks practice squad, that has been really, really. I think this is the week where you're going to potentially see him, maybe if it's not this week or next week, push for starting snaps at the other cornerback position. 6'2", 215 pounds. He's long, he's lean. And he's got 2 years of starting experience. That's an interesting name for me with the San Francisco, of course. So I'm glad that you brought up that opposite corner position, because it has been a position of weakness for the Bills. And teams have had the ability to pick on a guy like Ryan Lewis, although I do think Ryan Lewis has played well in his own right, because he has the closing speed that a lot of other guys on the team, i.e. Phillip Gaines, and some of the other Lafayette Pitts that don't have that closing or that recovery speed, Ryan Lewis does. So I think in Brandon Beane's own right, and the pro scouting staff has done a nice job filling out that other cornerback position that going into week 1, I mean, they were dressing 4 corners, 3 corners, I think, at times. So, to your point, I do think that the other corner position is filling out nicely. And I think it's a good matchup this week against the weaker depth. They don't have great, obviously, as Matt has sort of alluded to, they don't have one guy outside of T.Y. Hilton that sort of stands out that is going to at least scare a Leslie Frazier.
Absolutely. Yeah. And real quick here before we get into the other side of the ball here, I do want to ask you, kind of touched on the Colts offensive line a little bit, and a guy that I started to really crush pretty hard on in the draft process was one of Nate's former boys as a Notre Dame guy, and Quentin Nelson. I saw a stud in him. I knew that the Bills had no chance at getting him, but I still fell in love with him anyway. How is he developing over there for you? I always like to check in on some of these guys since I don't get to watch a lot. How has his development been so far, 6 games into his career?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had you guys. I didn't hear you, man. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Just checking in on Quentin Nelson, a guy that I was crushing on pretty hard in the draft process. Just checking in on his development and where he's at so far.
Been one of those guys, man, that is going to come out and just blow people away at times. But he's also showing that he's human. I mean, he's just not. he's not a guy who's going to blow everybody out. He's gotten some trouble with Leonard Williams last week, who picked him up off the ground. That happens occasionally. He's still a rookie though, man, and he is just killing it. If you're taking the entire package of what he brings, what he has shown, and how dominant he has looked, they are literally using him every time to go back and forth when they're polling. And you follow him, you'll see where the ball's going. That is almost a guarantee. He's powerful, he's smart, and you really like to see that. But it's hard to remember he's a rookie. And when you see him get blown out, you're like, oh my God, man, he just got rocked. But it happens very few and far between. And you have to remember he's a rookie. Otherwise, he's been fantastic. He's good at the second level. He's good polling. He gets out in space. He annihilates people. And if we had a more consistent offensive line who could help with all that to a more consistent combination of the running backs and the offensive line to be able to really get this running game going, that in itself would eliminate the need for big issues with, some of the skill players. But I don't know that you could really have a negative thing to say about Quentin Wilson right now. Or Quentin Nelson. I said Wilson.
No worries, man. Now let's flip it over to the other side of the ball, because obviously, as Nate has been very outspoken here this week about the Bills' offense, is not a particularly difficult offense to stop at any point so far in this season. We're fielding Derek Anderson as a quarterback, a guy who hasn't really done anything in the league since I was 25 years old. I'm 35 now, so it's been a while for him. So what about this Colts defense, though, should strike fear in the heart of Bills fans outside of the fact that we're just not a very good team ourselves?
I think, that Darius Leonard has really shown that he's a guy who can be fast, who can, he can cover, he can do it all. He can rush the passer. He is a guy who we really like. Obviously, defensively, we had a guy like Matthias Farley, as far as in the safety core, who was a little bit of a perfect third safety in the rotation there. You get him and Geathers both injured. He went to IR, so that brings that down a little bit. The rest of this linebacking core is very fun. Anthony Walker is a guy who a lot of people are not giving the credit he deserves. He's done great keeping guys limited after the catch, which is a big help right now. And he's been pretty solid against the run, and he's been pretty solid about closing off the edges. You like to see some of the guys on the back end get a little bit better as far as the cornerback room. But all in all, because we saw last week, Nate Hairston and Kenny Moore, both who've had plenty of opportunity to have good games, right? And they've had some good games. But the problem is they're just not consistent. And that's kind of I don't know, there's not a better word that describes the Colts, to be quite honest with you. They were outside and they were against trips, which is notoriously terrible for the Colts, to get through. Both of them bit on the bubble fake, and the tight end goes for a touchdown over all of them. So it's just inconsistency. They'll have good games, but then again, they're always going to have these games that really stop them, and that's the problem.
Nate, when you look at this Colts team and you look at this Bills offense, and we know that they're struggling to get really anything going, like I said, bringing in Derek Anderson, how do you think that this Bills team can attack this defense and kind of keep them in this game? Where are you seeing the weaknesses?
Yeah, so honestly, they're a stronger unit than, and Matt could probably talk, speak to this a little bit even better than me, but a stronger unit than I think myself and a lot of people thought that they would be, especially 6 games in. I think if people thought they were going to be as good as they are, or at least above average as they've been playing, it would have been later in the season when they've had time to go through some growing pains, and Malik Hooker, comes fully back from that injury and really starts to come into his own on that back end. But they've put things together pretty well. And I think Frank Reich has just brought a steady hand. And it's kind of, I always really liked Frank Reich. I always thought he really made a lot of sense for the Bills the years that they had been looking for coaches, really the last 2. I really like what he's done in terms of just being a head coach. Obviously, he's an offensive-minded guy, but he brought good coaches in. And I think the scheme that they play, and the 2 guys that stick out to me, 1, Malik Hooker, 2 is Marcus Hunt, who, as Matt alluded to, like 31 years old. That's not usually the time when players are coming into their own. Usually it's when they're starting to wind down. He's going to absolutely be an issue for Jordan Mills. and that right side of the offensive line this week. I think where you're going to have to try to exploit this defense is in between the tackles early, with the idea that they have to establish the run. The Bills have to establish the run this week with Derek Anderson back there, quarterback, only 2 weeks in the playbook. But I do think that this week there will be more passing plays open to this Bills offense than the last 6 weeks or so, because as much as Nathan Peterman is limited as a passer, and as much as Josh Allen is limited as a passer in terms of accuracy, you sort of get the middle guy here, right? In Derek Anderson, a guy who is at least, and this is what I like about Derek Anderson, opposed to the other two guys, is he's seen a lot of things. There's not going to be a lot of things the Colts are going to do to confuse Derek Anderson. And I think that maybe gives him and this Bills offense a little bit of an advantage. And I've told you this off air, and I've said it a few times on Twitter, is all the Bills need to be is the worst offense in 20 years instead of the worst offense in 70 years. Because if they can figure out a way to just be bad and not terrible, there are wins left on this schedule, and there were wins that they could have had. And I think last week as one of them, if they just weren't terrible on offense, that there are wins to be had. And this defense obviously is good enough to keep them in football games. It's just about keeping drives alive, and hell, just getting Stephen Hauschka in range. They have one of the best kickers in football, and they don't ever really get to use him because they can't even get past the opponent's 50. So I think it has to do this week with a lot of getting past the 50 and allowing Stephen Hauschka to be a bigger part of the game plan than he's been the first 6 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And not having your special teams bury you in a 10-point hole to start a game would also be a nice, helpful thing. Matt, kind of to flip that same question over to you here, as you look at this Bills team and kind of see what they've done up to this point, definitely had some blowouts. It's been a really roller coaster, polarizing season out here in Buffalo. Some blowouts, some close games. Last week, obviously, with the one that they let slip with the team you guys know very well over there in Houston. When you're looking at this offense versus your defense, is there anything that we've got going that kind of scares you, or you say, hey, we really got to come in and contain this, otherwise the game can get out of our favor? What are you looking at us and seeing as a threat, if you will?
About your offense or your defense?
Yeah, our offense against your defense.
Right now it just depends on if the defense can keep these running game to a minimum. That's a big thing for the Colts, because they've done fairly decent against some teams in the running game. When they do that, they tend to keep the games pretty close. I don't know that I see a real threat, but it doesn't really take one, to be quite honest with you, with this Colts defense, because these zones at time can be so open.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like a lot of the coordination on the back end with all the new faces, everything that's happened with injuries, that seems to be the biggest issue. Can you stay healthy enough to where the guys who are in there can actually form some chemistry and become, a decent team or can be good enough to stop a team, and they don't have to be a good team. We've seen that the Colts have proven that they, are going to struggle against, some weaker teams, but they've also proven that they can play hard against some of the better teams. Honestly, the Houston Texans had no business being in that game, and the Colts gave them 14 points at the beginning of the I really think that the Jets game was I think that you saw Sam Darnold's kind of coming out party there. That's a difficult game to get in, but they're just losing these games, with one score and a half, those are the killers, right? So how do you get that? You have to keep them out of the end zone. The Colts defense has done a decent job of doing that, especially in the past, but not the Patriots game, but a couple of these games, they've kept these teams out of the end zone a whole bunch of times. They only allowed 2 against the Eagles, and none against the Redskins. And so you see this team and you see some of the potential, but really, they can look terrible against terrible teams and they can look good against good teams. There's nothing about this team that tells you what's going to happen before game day. It actually has to happen during the game for you to understand what, when people ask me, do the Colts have a chance? Yeah, they've got a chance. Are they going to win? I don't have a clue, because we're going to show up. There really is such a drastic drop off from good Colts to bad Colts. And most of the time, and what we've seen lately, it happens in game, the complete switch from one to the other.
I do feel like, in getting ready for this week, that the Bills may have a chance in this game. And to kind of your point, Nate, I think it's going to come down to the leg of Stephen Hauschka for the Bills. I really don't know that they're going to put a lot of touchdowns. Like Matt was saying, I think the Colts will probably be able to keep them out of the end zone quite a bit. But I think that this game in itself on both sides of the ball, with as good as the Bills defense has been playing, as bad as their offense is going to be playing, I think this is a game the NFL doesn't love. I think this is a game fans are going to have a hard time sludging through. A lot of kicked footballs going through the uprights. Nate, would you kind of agree with that type of a game that we're to expect?
I mean, that's what Sean McDermott wants.
Oh, come on.
That's what they want. That's how they view. That's how they think that they can win football games. And the interesting thing, and Kevin Massari tweeted this out today, and I thought it was really interesting, right? That Kelvin Benjamin could be a bigger part of the game plan than he has been in previous weeks. Interesting to note, since 2014, Anderson in 2 starts between Anderson and Benjamin, and only 2 starts, Kelvin Benjamin catches for 196 yards and a touchdown. Those are some interesting stats considering that's a 2-game sample, and both of them obviously played together in 2014 in Carolina. And I look at that and I think to myself, okay, there's already a little bit of chemistry there. And Derek Anderson's going to understand a little bit what he has and what he's going to be throwing to and where Kelvin Benjamin prefers the football. Eventually, I mean, this is what I think most Bills fans thought going into this year, is that Kelvin Benjamin was going to be a matchup nightmare for a lot of smaller corners in the league, and more so in zone defenses, and in jump ball situations in the red zone. So I do think that there is going to be an opportunity for Kelvin Benjamin to get involved in the game plan, maybe more so than he has been. But I do think at the end of the day that the Bills just saw Pro Football Focus has them listed as the 4th best pass rush in the league. I think that's probably pretty fair ranking. They don't have that A+ pass rush. They don't have the Khalil Mack, the Von Millers, the Michael Bennett's. But what they do have are 3 B+, A- pass rushers and a bunch of Bs across the board, and they rotate them in and out, and they're always fresh. The Bills' defensive line is very difficult to block across the board, whether it's first down, second down, and now especially third down, because now they put in that sort of NASCAR package where they've got Lorenzo Alexander, Trent Murphy, Harrison Phillips, and or Kyle Williams, who's been playing really well in the pass rushing form, and then obviously Jerry Hughes, who right now is arguably playing the best football of his career and is arguably one of the most effective pass rushers in terms of pressures that ultimately do turn into sacks, but not all of them. But in terms of pressures, one of the most effective pass rushers in the league, and his get off the ball has been really impressive this year. It's reminiscent of 2015 and 2016 Jerry Hughes, where he was really motivated and playing. And I think maybe that's the matchup you look at this week, is Jerry Hughes going up against his former team. Put it on his Instagram this week that they gave up on him after 1 season, and he had posted or reposted an article talking about him being a bust after his rookie season. So yeah, he's motivated in this game, which I think a motivated Jerry Hughes is a scary Jerry Hughes.
Yeah, the best thing about Jerry Hughes is we're not seeing the personal fouls that we've been used to seeing his whole career. So he's changed that. So Matt, kind of to summarize, and kind of flip again that question back on you. Overall, this team's heading into your home stadium. What do the Colts have to do? Kind of an overall overarching thing to win this game. And what do you kind of foresee this game being? Do you think it's going to end up being a high scoring game, low scoring game? And what do you guys got to do to walk away with a W?
Well, honestly, I don't really think that it takes much more than the offensive line protecting Luck, and Luck being who he's been right now, because they've proven that they can put the points up on the board. I mean, the Colts have definitely been a scoring team here. You were talking about 3 games in the 20s, 2 in the 30s. They've only had 1 game where they've scored less than 20 right now, and that right there is what's keeping them in these games, to be quite honest with you. They just have to keep the Bills from being able to, come in and have one of those games that they just, one of those games that not even the Bills fan base expects to see. And that's kind of where it lies, to be honest with you. The Colts can give up 20 points and still walk away with a win. And I think that the Colts have at least 28 in them, honestly, in this one, especially with, the quarterback situation, what they've got going right there, and some other things that the Bills kind of are not really, I mean, they're just not a well-rounded team, right now. They have some good points too. And I think that that's fair. but I also think that a lot of what they lack is where Andrew Luck can kind of pick them apart. And I think that that's ultimately all that the Colts need. And he can't be a turnover machine. Not that he's been terrible this year. A lot of it's been bad luck, but he still had a couple of those awful throws. I mean, 2 of his 3 picks the other night were just terrible. Even the touchdown that he threw to Eric Swope was a terrible throw. You know what I mean? He had Eric Swope going on that smash concept to the back corner of the end zone, and he ended up trying to throw it through the 2 defenders on the short receivers who were crashing in on those 5-yard ends. And that's a terrible throw. You had nobody at the corner of the end zone, but you tried to throw a bullet instead of just lofting it to a guy. That could have easily been a pick. And we've seen that from him. But Andrew Luck's been largely fantastic. He's just got to eliminate those mistakes, especially when they're in the red zone, and he's got to eliminate it when he's backed up against his own goal line.
Matt, hold on. Yeah, AQ, I just had one question for you. Any residual effects from that? I mean, what is it, a year and a half, almost 2-year shoulder injury? That at least anyone there, maybe just is he taking practice time out? Is he a limited participant early in the week, or is he really been full bore? I mean, he didn't throw an NFL-sized football until training camp.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because what they were talking about in training camp is that they were going to get him kind of like into a regular season mojo in training camp. And he's only had, if I'm not mistaken, 2 of the 6 weeks he's been on the injury report. And I don't think that either one of them were anything serious at all. And I wish I could remember back, that far, but I think only 2 weeks he's been on the injury report. So he's chucking it. It doesn't look like he's having any residual effects. His Mondays off are obviously big for him.
Right.
So getting treatment, being able to rest and relax and maybe get some stretching done and whatnot. But I don't think that we're seeing any issues with him. He's throwing 40 times a game. And even when he gets to that peak right there, you don't see anything on film where he kind of looks like he doesn't want to throw it deep. He's going to chuck it, and he looks comfortable doing it.
I got one last question for you here, and we'll let you get back to your evening. And it's actually more a question I think Nate really wants to ask you, but I'll ask for him. Okay. Will you trade us Jacoby Brissett?
Yes, that's the question. What's it going to cost, Matt?
Oh, what's it going to take? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
It might take a first.
I
only say that because I think that he's going to be a guy that the Colts hang on to and try to kind of really keep him. Like, look, if we have you, we are going to keep you as a backup, and you might start if Andrew Luck ever gets hurt. You will start if Andrew Luck ever gets hurt. But I'm saying your chances of starting are null unless Andrew Luck gets hurt. If they do that, that's just going to drive the price up anyways. You know what I'm saying? People are going to see him. People have seen him. I think that Jacoby has a really nice ceiling. He's not there yet, anywhere near it, but he could make a couple different teams in the NFL right now a lot better. I think it could possibly just take a 2, and I think there'd be some finagling on the back end of that deal, but I really think a high 2, it would have to be kind of closer to, not necessarily the deadline. It might have to be an off-season trade where they know they can get a first-round guy. Maybe they've got another veteran in line to sign as the backup. I think a lot of things would have to happen for that because, Chris Ballard went out and got him. He loves him. Frank Reich loves him. Jim Irsay loves him. He's going to be a hard guy to get off the Colts' hands, honestly. Regardless of what you think of him, you know what I'm saying?
And if you haven't learned the lesson from the Bills yet, it's good to have
it's good to have a good second.
A good second string quarterback. Just hang on to him. You don't want Nate Peterman coming in and playing for you. So anyway, man, I know you got to get going here this evening. So thank you for taking the time to come on with us and discuss this game. And I want to say I wish you the best of luck, but I just wish you guys the best of health coming through this game and that everybody stays healthy. Any last things you want to say to our fans here and where they can find you?
No, but I will take the injury help, all that we can for sure. Yeah. You guys can catch me on Twitter at mdanelysb. Appreciate you guys having me on. Had a lot of fun. Good conversation. This is what it's all about. So thank you guys for having me on. And, we'll see what happens on Sunday in Indy.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for joining us. And Nate, anything else you got for the fans, man? What are you working on? Where are you going to be? What are you going to be doing here coming up here this week?
Pre-game, halftime, post-game, GR550. Obviously, you can catch me. Matt, have a good one, brother. Thanks for joining us. I've I've been contemplating some written content the last couple days, and I have been fairly critical the last few weeks, just based on just how poor this offense has really been over the past, especially really from the start, right? Week 1, they looked absolutely putrid. And you thought after that Minnesota game that they had taken maybe they had put some of those woes behind them, right? But a lot of them had manifested themselves. But I am to a certain extent willing to be patient. It's, to be honest, the injury to Josh Allen sucks, right? Like, it sucks because he finally was going to get through that stretch of vaunted defenses that, Benjamin Albright's talking, well, maybe the Bills want to sit him the first 6 weeks. They don't want to send him out there against those defenses that they're playing. They're playing the 3rd, the 4th, the 7th, and the 9th ranked defenses in the league in those first 6 games. Maybe the best last week, even the best last week. And they were facing a team that had a lot of holes at the cornerback position. They just could not exploit because they have a pass rush or inaccurate passes from Josh Allen. So it sucks that Josh Allen's not playing. I wish that he would have had an opportunity to face this Colts defense. But at the same time, I do think that even what he says, and I know you said it too, that it's maybe a little bit of blessing in disguise, right? That he gets a little bit of time. I don't buy that he's learning anything in preparation from what he's going to see from Derek Anderson. But I do think that anytime you're a starting quarterback and that sort of gets pulled from you, whether it's injury or play, there is this level of greater concentration on your faults. He's going to have a lot of time to look back the past 4 weeks and see what he did wrong and try to sort of fix it. And the one thing that I do think is fixable here, Aaron, is he's a little bit trigger shy right now. And I think it's because of what he's being preached and what his respecting the football, right? Like, and that's what Sean McDermott preached about why he probably can't play Nathan Peterman. I think amongst a lot of other reasons that you can't play Nathan Peterman, but that respecting the football means a lot to this organization. It means a lot to Sean McDermott. It means a lot to Brian Dable. And I think he's got that so ingrained in the back of his head that he's unwilling to pull the trigger on simple concepts, simple slant out concepts, where you've got one guy coming inside and one guy going to the outside. Those kinds of concepts are open to him almost every play. They were last week. He had a ton of flat, just arrow routes to the flat, to Zay Jones, to Andre Holmes. I was Zay Jones and Andre Holmes. That were available to him on the 3rd step, but he just, for whatever reason, is a little gun shy right now. And I think maybe a couple weeks on the bench is going to help him realize, especially watching Derek Anderson hit them on the 3rd step, because that's what Derek Anderson's going to do. He's going to hit those on the 3rd step. And I think if he could just get it to those guys, that's going to help this offense move the ball a little bit better. It's going to help, I think, Zay Jones, who's coming into his own right now. I think that is huge news for this Bills offense, that Zay Jones, I think, really is playing up to the pace, or at least where we wanted to see him last year, right? Like, we wanted to see some of this production happen in the game and not in garbage time. So I like what I'm seeing from Zay Jones. To a certain extent, I like what I've been seeing from Charles Clay. The problem with Clay and Kroom is they're having to catch the ball off their shoelaces, and they're not able to catch the ball in stride and continue running with it. But those 3 guys, and obviously I really, really, really like what I've seen from Chris Ivory since he's been here. I really like the signing. Albeit, it's a backup running back. How great of a signing can it really be? A lot of people don't like it because he's not the ideal 2018 running back. He's not a lot of glitz and glamour. He's more of the grit and hammer. I just made that up, by the way. That's badass.
Yeah,
I think I'm gonna DM him right now and ask him if he wants to use that.
I'll make him an image.
You should make that into an image.
I want to pull it back.
Glamour, grit and hammer.
I want to pull it back, though, for 1 second, because I think you talked about something that is a real problem, but I don't know that I agree with you on where the problem comes from, right? So I do agree that Sean McDermott is the respect the football, doesn't want to turn it over. I get that defensive mantra. I don't know that Brian Dable is instilling that in Josh Allen to the point where he's
You're right.
willing to pull the trigger because of what the offensive coordinator. I think it's coming from the self-awareness of his inaccuracy. Like you said, Charles Clay's getting wide open slants at his toes. And you saw it a little bit in the last game. Zay Jones, there was 2 plays where Zay Jones had a chance to make a play on the ball. One, he lollipopped over to him where he should have really hit him with something with that rocket, and he probably could have made a play in the red zone, but instead he allowed the defender to get over there. And then the other one, he just, he rocketed in when he should have really put it up high in the corner of the end zone for Zay. And that's, I think he's lacking the confidence in himself more than being taught.
I agree with you that Brian Dable's probably not doing, but I guarantee that Sean McDermott, because if you watch any video during practice, and a couple weeks ago, they showed video, I think it was after the Vikings? Oh, the Green Bay game. After the Green Bay game, Sean McDermott's over and lighten up the offense for lackadaisical routes and a couple of drop passes just during like warm-up period where Josh Allen's throwing to wide receivers. That's the time, and in the meeting room, because I guarantee Sean McDermott's sitting in with the quarterbacks during the meetings, that when Brian Dable isn't talking, that Sean McDermott is saying, my defense is playing great football. What you can't do is you can't give them more possessions. You can't put my defense in more disadvantage situations or non-advantageous positions, because as it is, they're bailing you out for not being able to sustain drives and continue. And like we talked about with Matt, is move the ball past the 50-yard line. But I know for certain that he's hearing it from Sean McDermott. And as much as Brian Dable's a vocal guy, Sean McDermott has the ear of this football team. You can bet he does.
No,
and I think that is a philosophy. The respecting the football as much as respecting the process is respecting the football is right there. That is a philosophy of Sean McDermott. And whether that's offensively, defensively, special teams, especially this week, we're like you mentioned, and I think, listen, we talked a little bit about this I talked about the pro scouting department. They've done a tremendous job. I mentioned Dante Johnson. But the other guy, Corey Boroquez, their punter, has been such a find for them. He is money. He's a great punter. I think he's going to be a punter here in Buffalo for a long, long time. He does exactly what you want. He's got great hang time. He's got the left foot, so he's got an opposite spin on the football, which I think helps him. But he's a great directional punter, and he pins. I think he's leading the league right now with punts inside the 20-yard line. So the pro scouting department bringing in mid-season or here during the season and right after training camp has been solid. But you mentioned it. The special teams has to be better. They can't give a team 10 points, and that's what they did. And otherwise, that defense is probably letting up 3 points to the Houston Texans last week.
I do respect your opinion in the sense that it's frustrating that Sean McDermott's a defensive-minded head coach. I know a lot of people have this idea that he's bringing the Bills back 20 years as far as what an NFL team and NFL offense looks like. I don't know that that's the long-term plan. I can see why it's frustrating right now in this team with the lack of talent that this team has, and the defense is keeping them in games. So I understand what you're saying there. And I do think Sean McDermott's probably in the room saying, hey, look, defense has been bailing you guys out for weeks. And if you turn the ball over, that just makes everything so much more difficult if we're trying to win games right now. But I do think that Brian Dable has a plan for this offense. He's getting crushed a little bit on Twitter. I don't think that that's fair, because guys are open, concepts are there, I think, and it's not outdated concepts that Brian Dable's guys getting open. So it's not this team itself is not dragging the Bills back 20 years. It's the production that is 20 years behind the ball. And I think that a lot of that's talent. And I think a lot of that is something that's going to take time. And like you said, that pro development, that's going to be something that's huge in developing talent and maybe finding guys maybe aren't a big name in free agency, but come in and bring some production to the offensive side.
My biggest fear becomes, and everybody wants to talk about it, and I keep bringing this up because it's a very convenient take that, hey, look at Jared Goff through 7 games. And first of all, they're just completely different.
Josh Allen isn't. Yeah.
They're just completely different players. Their strengths are different. And the college productions is just completely different. What I think people want to compare about Goff, though, is a fair comparison that in year 2, he had a completely new renovated offense around him, and he had a great offensive-minded coach. What I just want to caution people is Sean McVay's not walking through the door. As good as Brian Dable could potentially be, he's still not Sean McVay. Sean McVay is one of the great. I think will go down as one of the greater minds of offensive football in this league. Some of the stuff that I saw on Twitter, his play recognition, he is a beautiful mind. That guy, he is a beautiful mind. Like that guy is a savant. Like there aren't many like him. And secondly, I worry that they're not going to, at least this year, this upcoming offseason, $90 million or not. And I know it's looking forward a little. My biggest fear is that they're not going, correct. And a top 10 pick, probably. They won't be able to show a free agent, not only because it's Buffalo, and I know that people in Buffalo think it's great, but not everyone else does. And sometimes it's a hard sell, and everyone will point to Mario Williams.
Your Twitter's going to burn to the ground tonight.
And everybody points to Mario Williams. And what I remember and what I have to tell people is they probably paid Mario Williams $20 million over in terms of the entire contract, $20 million over his value, because just to get him here, they wouldn't let him leave either. And sure, I mean, and the problem is you're never going to get that $100 million production. It's just that was never going to be realistic. They got what they got from Mario Williams for 2 or 3 years, and that was that. Will they be able to persuade a guy like Golden Tate to come here? I have reservations about that. You know, offensive linemen, they can probably get a couple good offensive linemen for agency because offensive linemen they don't care about having nightclubs. They don't care about having nightlife. You know what I'm saying? Like those guys, their careers are short. They're here to do business. Offensive linemen are just made differently. I just worry about skill position players. Can you get a couple of wide receivers? Like you're going to need a couple. So they have all that cap room. I just hope that they can bring in adequate talent because I just worry that they won't want to come here.
But there's other ways to acquire talent, right? Like they got Shady, moving parts and pieces, the capital, and that's what I like. And I would
wonder too. Like there are 2 teams this year: the Oakland Raiders, who are absolutely 100%.
They're selling everybody.
It depends. If they win some more games and the Bills end up in front of them, I could see a scenario where they're second because they have 2 first-round picks. I could see a scenario where they could potentially trade and move up, right, to try to get their quarterback because I think that they're going to move on from Derek Carr.
Right.
The other team that I'm really looking at as a potential team that could be a trade candidate is the Green Bay Packers, who have 2 first-round picks. I would absolutely be comfortable if they wanted to move up, if Green Bay wanted to move up and go get a legitimate defender that the Bills could move back and potentially get 2 first-round picks. They need lots of players. And 10 picks for me isn't enough. Like they need a lot of players next year. They should trade back. They should do whatever they can to continue stockpiling because I think that's the best way that this team's going to be able to build us through the draft for the future.
Through the draft, but do you think that you can use some of the flexibility that Brandon Beane's created? And I know fans are frustrated right now, but it took a long time.
It's also not a great free agent class.
Well, it's not. But
it's not great.
We just all agreed already that their pro department does a good job of finding people to fit what they need. It might not be a name that you've recognized or whatever, but they're going to have to fill some of those skill positions and with guys that aren't necessarily big names. Obviously, the development of Zay Jones is going to be big and filling one of those roles at the wide receiver room. But the point I'm trying to make here is it took a long time to get the flexibility that Brandon Beane needs, whether it's a lot of draft picks, cap availability, because even if you make a trade for a guy that's under contract, you need to be able to have the cap space to put him in on your roster. So all of that stuff isn't just, well, we have X amount of dollars to sign X amount of free agents and they have 10 picks. It's really more about flexibility, that if there's something available, the Bills have that flexibility to make really any move that they can to make this team better, which you saw what the Bears were able to do in bringing in Khalil Mack and having some of that flexibility and the vast amount of resources they spent this past summer and building something around Mitch Trubisky, who I do think has a lot of similar things to Josh Allen in the fact that he didn't have a lot of college production. He wasn't a big time top elite 11 quarterback growing up. And obviously they're very different quarterbacks, but he's still into the second year with a lot of weapons, frustrating Bears fans. Obviously he's come into his own the last couple of weeks, but yeah. I think that flexibility is nothing but a good thing. And I'm willing to see how it plays out. And if halfway through 2019, this team is still in the position we're in, that's when I think I'll join you in the critique of this organization and the regime.
Let's hope so, man. I could tell you that I definitely have my reservations about the quarterback position. What I'm glad of, though, is that Josh Allen isn't out for some sort of long-term Tommy John type situation, because I think that would have done as bad as that would have been for the kid. I think it would have been worse off for not only the fan base, but for this organization, because it would have forced them to really push the evaluation of him in that first round pick another 2-3 years. So I'm glad for a lot of reasons that it's just going to be a week-to-week injury. But he's going to get probably, and listen, if Derek Anderson plays competent football here, it's going to be hard to take him out, especially if because Sean McDermott, and I keep trying to tell people that are saying that they're rebuilding, they plan on winning football games. They are winning football games. They're trying to win football games. So I think that if Derek Anderson plays competent football and they're better on offense these next couple of weeks while Allen recovers, that until this team is fully out of it, I think that's maybe when you'll see Allen again.
Oof. See, I think Allen comes back for the Jaguars game. I think that he goes up into the bye. And
I hope so, because I want him to go up against Jalen Ramsey.
Oh, yeah, that'll be a fun conversation.
He talked a bunch of shit about Allen, and I want him to go up against two. As much as I have my reservations about Allen, I hope that the two players that have turned into like mini Joey Porters for me, and that's Jamal Adams and Jalen Ramsey. I hope that Allen just shuts those guys up, because they both talked a ton of shit about him.
Yeah, that'd be nice. We could talk about this probably all day. We should probably have a separate podcast to go about the process. I think somebody mentioned that on Twitter for you and I to get on about the process. I do want to encourage Bills fans, though. Nate gets killed a lot, and I'm in there killing him a little bit too, and I get killed a lot. This is all just opinions. I don't know that either one of us are necessarily right about this, but at the end of the day, I think we all want the same thing, which is success for the Bills. So remember that. When you're yelling at each other on Twitter, to not get too mad or take things too personal, because it's tough times right now. It's divisive times of being a Bills fan, but just try to have fun with it. The regular
it's sort of
season,
like the Trump presidency, Bills fan.
It's only here for so long, the regular season. So just remember to enjoy it, because it's a long off season, guys. So instead of fighting all the time, let's try to enjoy it. I got to take my own advice, actually. I shouldn't be telling people what to do. So anyway, Nate, if people are looking at your beautiful face here for the first time and they really like kind of the words that are coming out of your mouth, where can they find you? Put that stuff away.
They can find me at Nate Kaiir WGR. And of course, tweet at me, because I will tweet back. So.
It's true. He will. He might even retweet you. You can find myself at Aaron Quinn 716, and I'll be all up probably trying to prove Nate wrong in some way over on the twitter.com. Make sure you go over and follow everywhere that Cover One is. We are on Twitter, Instagram. Subscribe over here on the YouTube channel and click that little bell, because that'll notify you whenever we go live. We go live on Wednesdays for the matchup show, like you're here tonight for, and then Sundays after the game around 7:00. We go live with Greg Thompson, just kind of going over the game. Eric is always posting a ton of stuff to the YouTube channel. I think we're up around 800 videos now, and a lot of that is just breakdowns. So if you're a fan of learning about the game, Cover One is the premier place to be to get all your breakdowns, all 22 stuff. So follow us. And if you're interested in getting a little bit more than the common consumer gets, head over to cover1.net. Check out our premium subscriptions. For $25 for the whole year, you get access to the premium content. That gets you the premium content on the website, as well as access to the Slack channel, our film room, all kinds of goodies. You can head over to the site, check it out now. Thanks for joining us tonight, you guys. We really can't do the show without you. It's very appreciated that you come in here and join us or listen to us on your podcast. We really do appreciate it, and enjoy the game this weekend. And let's hope Derek Anderson brings us a W out in Indy. We'll see. We'll see you guys Sunday for the post-game show. Thanks.